Assalamu alaikum. This is lecture number 28 of Global Business Management. The topic of today's lecture is Global Human Resource Management. We are continuing this topic in lecture 27 and 28. We have 4 learning objectives for today's lecture. The first one is to recognize how management development and training programs can increase the value of human capital in international business firm. And the second learning objective is to understand how and why performance appraisal systems might vary across nations, to understand how and why compensation systems might vary across nations, and the fourth one is to understand how organized labor can influence strategic choices in the international business firms. Before we start talking about today's topics, we quickly recap the last lecture. In the last lecture we had discussed about human resource management in the perspective of international business, and we had discussed that the activities of an organization carries out to utilize its human resource effectively is called human resource management. These activities include determining human resource strategy, staffing, performance evaluation, management development, compensation, labor relation, and the fifth one is firms need to ensure that there is a fit between their human resources practices and strategy. These are the important functions of human resource management. Human resource management can help the firm to reduce the cost of value creation and add value by. This is the main through the just like the marketing, other functions of the businesses like marketing, operations, production, and just like those functions, HRM is also a function which can increase the value of a firm or reduce the cost to create the value for the firm. HRM must also determine when to use expatriate managers. The expatriate managers, citizens of one country working abroad, who should be sent to the foreign assignments, and how they should be compensated, and how they should be trained, and how they should be reoriented when they return home. When we talk about the HRM, international HRM, then we have to under this rubric we have to discuss these 5 elements regarding the expatriate managers, people who are working in the other countries. What sort of people and who should be sent for those assignments? This is the first thing, and how they should be compensated, and the next one is how they should be trained, and the last one is when they get back home, how they should be reoriented for the environment of the back home. Staffing policy is concerned with the selection of employees who have the skills required to perform a particular job. Staffing policy is this is the important element of the human resource management. It is a tool for developing and promoting the firm's corporate culture, the organization's norms and value system. A strong corporate culture can help the firm implement its strategy. There are 3 main approaches of staffing. The first one is the ethnocentric approach, in which all the key management positions are filled by the host country. We had discussed the example of if the firm has the headquarters in the USA and it's operating in the Chinese market, then in ethnocentric approach, firm is going to fill the key management position from the US people. The polycentric approach is when all those people will be recruited from the Chinese market, from the host country. And the geocentric approach means all those key management positions will be filled by most appropriate, more skillful people, irrespective of their origin. Each staffing approach has its advantages and disadvantages. Firm use an ethnocentric or geocentric staffing strategy will have expatriate managers. Of course, in ethnocentric and the geocentric, In both strategy, people will be hired from the other markets, and that involves the expatriate managers. Expatriate failure is a premature return. Okay, expatriate failure, there is a one term that when that expatriate manager get back home without or before completing its term is called expatriate failure. The main reason for U.S. expatriate failure are inability of an expatriate's spouse to adopt in the new culture, the manager's inability to adjust, manager itself couldn't adjust in the new market, other family-related reasons, the manager's personal or emotional maturity, the manager's inability to cope with the larger overseas responsibility. These are the 5 main issues we have seen that U.S. expatriate managers have been described. And a global mindset. Okay, when we talk about the expatriate manager, the next important issue is important element for the expatriate manager is the global mindset. Global mindset may be the fundamental attribute of the global manager, which comprises the cognitive complexity and the cosmopolitan outlook. After selecting a manager for a position, training and development program should be implemented. That's an important element of the when they select the people for the foreign job, they should provide training to them, and that training can be the cultural training, language training, practical training. And the cultural training foster an appreciation for the host country's culture. Language training and exclusive reliance on English diminishes an expatriate's ability to interact with host country's nationals. Mean if that person doesn't know the language, local language, that will diminishes the expatriate's ability, foreign managers, to interact with the local employees. Practical training helps the expatriate and her family ease themselves into the day-to-day life in the host country. Practical training means there should be some that can be provide some sort of practical knowledge and practical trainings which simulate the values, tradition and the norms of the new market, to make them familiar, the expatriate manager and his or her family, with the new environment. And that's why the practical training is provided. And the studies show only 30% of managers sent on 1 to 5 year expatriate assignment receive training before their departure. This is an important thing, since there is a high rate of expatriate failure, and the important reason of that failure is the lack of the training. And this figure shows that only 30% of the managers who are sent for expatriate jobs, the foreign job of 1 year to 5 year program, from 1 to 5 year assignment, only 30% of those people have received the proper training. Okay, why is a global mindset important? Global mindset is the important thing, which includes the cognitive complexity. To what extent cognitive, the cultural values, the norms, to what extent that manager giving the weightage to those elements. Cosmopolitan outlook, to what extent the manager's view is belong to the across cities or across country. Broad mindset should be really big, and that mindset should include the knowledge of the other cities. In a way, we should say the broader mindset. A global mindset is often acquired early in the life from main sources. In what ways managers get that global mindset? The first one is if the family of that manager is the bicultural, mean if the father and mother belongs to the different culture, or if that person is raised in certain culture, in different cultures. Might be in for instance, if in home he has some different culture, and in neighborhood he is experienced or he is raised in a different culture, then that means he is aware of, he is familiar with that different culture, and he is okay, he is fine with the diversity of the cultures. And the next one is living in foreign countries. If might be during the childhood or in the education period, might be if that have the experience of foreign countries, that experience of living give the global mindset. The last one is if that have the ability, or if has that manager has learned the foreign languages as a regular part of the family life in the beginning. Might be that manager has learned the several languages. These things gives the global mindset to the manager. What is training and management development? After selecting a manager for a position, training and development programs should be implemented. That's important. Like we have just read this statement that only 30% of the managers receive that training before sending to the foreign mission. And training focuses upon preparing the manager for a specific job, and training should be focused on that particular job, how that manager is going to perform that job in the new market, in the new context, in the new environment. Management development is concerned with developing the skills of the manager over time. It gives the manager a skill set and reinforces organizational culture. This sort of training, management development training, is providing the enhancing the skills of the manager to cope up in the new market and to adjust in the new market. These are two important things. And historically, most firms focus more on training than on management development. This is the important thing, that rather than focusing on the management development, firms, when they select a person to send for an assignment, they should prefer to provide them training. Training can reduce the expatriate failure, the first element, and training has the first part of the training is a cultural training, in which that training will foster an appreciation of the host country's culture. That training will provide the appreciation for the host country's culture. What sort of culture that country, people are going, that manager are going to face in the new market. This sort of things are going to be that manager will be get familiar with the new culture and what sort of new element, new environmental conditions that manager is going to face in the market will be provided in the cultural training. Language training might be if an exclusive reliance. Might be in language training. It's like this, that to provide the training of the local employees, a local language, because if you are purely relying on the language of your host country, then that will be a trouble, a hurdle for you, for the manager to interact with the local employees. Practical training. Practical training helps the expatriate and her family ease themselves into the day-to-day life in the host country. Practical training from where you are going to buy the stuff, what is the prices of the regular living livelihood things, and where you can go for recreational activities, and in what sort of schools you can send your kids, and what sort of markets you can go, and these sort of things will help the expatriate, the manager and manager's family to adjust in the new market. But study shows only 30% receive this sort of training. Training and development should include preparing and developing expatriate managers for re-entry into the home countries or organization. When those managers get back home, they need some sort of training to reconnect with the organization's culture. Because just imagine a scenario in which a person is sent for 5 years to another country, and when that person get back home after 5 years, but after serving in that country for 5 years, it needs some time to reconnect to the home country's environments. It need good programs for reintegrating expatriates back into the work life within their home country organization, utilizing the knowledge they acquired while abroad. I mean, there are two elements are associated with it. The first one is the training is required for reconnecting, reintegrating that person to the home country's organization. And the second thing is what they have learned in the foreign market, in the new market, what sort of things they have learned. That thing should be transmitted to the other managers and to the other relevant people. I mean, people should get knowledge from that person because of his experience. Okay, why is management development important to the firm study? Management development program increase the overall skill level of the managers through ongoing management education, rotation of managers through jobs within the firm to give them varied experience. Management development program increases the overall skill of the managers. There are two ways. The first one is ongoing management education, and the second thing is by shifting their jobs places, their responsibility, the managers learn the new things and they develop themselves. And management development can be a strategic tool to build a strong unifying culture and informal management network when they are working within the organization in the different places, or if they are working in the different markets in the farm market. Of course, they will build the people, build the connections, the networks, and this is really important, strategically really important for the companies. Support both transnational and global strategy. It's in that way when they build the cultural and informal management networks, it's really good for the firm in terms of transnational and global strategy. Monsanto, there is one program, they have a training program, and how Monsanto implement its management development program, we can see in this small case study. Monsanto is a global provider of agriculture products with 10,000 employees. At any one time, the company will have 100 mid and high level managers on extended positions abroad. 2/3 of these are Americans posted overseas. The remainder are foreign nationals employed in the United States. Okay, now here that this thing is saying that they have total number of employees around 10,000. 100 people at the managerial, at the higher managerial level, mid and high level managerial level, they're always assigned of foreign duties in the foreign markets, and 2/3 of these are the American posted overseas, and the remainder are the foreign national employed in the United States. And Monsanto managing expatriates and their repatriation begins with the rigorous selection process and intensive cross-cultural training, both for the managers and for their families. As at many other global companies, the idea is to build an internationally mindset, a cadre of highly capable managers who will lead the organization in the future. I mean, they are saying this, that when they select this sort of expatriate, it's a really tough selection procedure. And the second thing is, before sending those people to the overseas market, they are provided they along with their families are provided the intensive training, and the main important intention of this in providing this sort of training is to produce a cadre of highly capable managers who will lead the organization in the future. One of the strongest features of this program is that employees and their sending and receiving managers or sponsors develop an agreement about how this assignment will fit into the firm's business objectives. The focus is on why employees are going abroad to do the job and what their contribution to Monsanto will be when they return. This is the important thing. When what they are going to do abroad, and when they come back, how they are going to benefit with their experience to the company. Sponsoring managers are expected to be explicit about the kind of job opportunities the expatriate will have once they return home. Once they arrive back in their home country, expatriate managers meet with cross-cultural trainers during debriefing sessions. Debriefing means when they to brief someone after some meeting. For instance, you attend a meeting, I was not there, and when you come back from the meeting and you told me about what happened and what sort of things have been discussed in the meeting. This is called debriefing, and through the debriefing, the expatriates manager are providing their knowledge to the remaining managers. They are also giving the opportunity to showcase their experience to their peers, subordinates and superiors in the special information exchanges. However, Monsanto's repatriation program focuses on more than just business. It also attends to the family's re-entry. Monsanto has found that difficulties with repatriation often have more to do with the personal and the family-related issues than with the work-related issues. But the personal matters obviously affect an employee's on-the-job performance, so it is important for the company to pay attention to the situation. Monsanto is recognizing the fact that if the manager have the personal issues with his family, of course these personal issues will affect on the performance of the employee of that manager. So it is better and more appropriate to handle those family or personal issues of that, solve those family personal matters, and once they are solved or handled appropriately, the performance of manager will be increased as well. This is why Monsanto offers returning employees an opportunity to work through personal difficulties. About 3 months after they return home, expatriates meet for 3 hours of work, 3 hours at work with several colleagues of their choice. The debriefing sessions in conversations aided by a trained facilitator who has an outline to help the expatriate over all the important aspects of repatriation. The debriefing allows the employee to share important experiences and the enlighten managers, colleagues and friends about his or her experience, so others within the organization can use some of the global knowledge. According to one participant, it sounds silly, but it's such a hectic time in the family's life. You don't have time to sit down and take stock of what's happening. You are going through the move, transitioning to a new job, a new house, and the children may be going to a new school. This is a kind of chaos. A time to talk and put your feelings on the table. Apparently it works. Since the program was introduced, the attrition rate among returning expatriates has dropped sharply. Monsanto is providing sort of a facility, the opportunity for the expatriates to share their experiences and their difficulties and what they have learned from there, and allow their colleagues, their peers, their subordinates to learn from their experiences. How should expatriate be evaluated? Evaluating expatriates can be especially complex. Typically, both host nation managers and the home office manager evaluate the performance of expatriate managers, but both types of managers are subject to unintentional bias. Home country managers tend to rely on hard data. When evaluating expatriate, host country managers can be biased towards their own frame of reference. Important thing is that like any other employee, expatriates are their performance are evaluated as well. Who are going to evaluate? The home country managers or host country manager? This one is talking about the biasness which can be created because of the origin of the managers. When the home country managers are evaluating the performance of the expatriate manager, they are going to rely on the hard data. I mean, for instance, there is a firm, a US firm operating in China. When the person who is sitting in the a manager is sent to the Chinese market, to the China, and his performance will be evaluated by the person who is sitting in the USA headquarter. Of course, he is going to see only the figures, the balance sheet figures or other figures, performance figures of that manager, how that person, the performance has been achieved in the Chinese company. While if the person is sitting in the top manager is sitting in the Chinese market, then he can be biased towards their own frame of reference. That person can be biased because of some other elements as well. Okay, how can performance appraisal bias be reduced? Now we are talking about this biasness should be reduced, and what are the different ways to reduce this biasness. To reduce bias in performance appraisal, more weight should be given to an on-site manager's appraisal than to an off-site manager's appraisal. So this is the first element. Like if we continue talking about the Chinese and the US firm, then we will see this thing that the first point is saying that when the performance of that manager who is working in China is appraised, then there should be a weightage of Chinese, the CEO or some top HR manager who is going to evaluate the performance of that guy who is working in China, that the weightage should be more for the Chinese manager, evaluator, compared to the US evaluator. This is the first thing. A former expatriate who has served in the same location should be involved in the process. Okay, when people who are sitting in the USA and they are trying to evaluate the performance of the manager who is working in the China, then in evaluation there should be one person who have already served in Chinese market. That person should be involved in evaluation process because that person knows the market condition and environment. Home office managers should be consulted before an on-site manager completes a formal termination evaluation. Okay, before the on-site manager complete that formal evaluation, he or she should consult the back home office, the headquarters. What are the key issues in compensating expatriates? Now we talk about the expatriate compensation. There are two issues involved in the expatriate compensation. The first one is how to adjust compensation to reflect differences in economic circumstances and compensation practices, and how to pay expatriate managers. The first one is how they should, because there are some big issues are involved because that person is leaving his home, his family is moving, his kids are moving, he is emotionally disturbed, and because of this thing, that person should be compensated for those sacrifices. And in compensation, the first one is how that person is compensated, and in what ways they should be compensated. Currently, there are substantial differences in executive compensation across countries. Across countries, this is the huge difference in compensation packages. Research shows that a top US executive made an average of $525,923 in the 2005 and 6 period, compared to around about half of the amount in Japan and quarter of the amount in Taiwan. That means that the US executive are compensated with high figures. Now the question, how should national difference in compensation be treated? There are some national differences in labor laws, in the compensation, in the country standard. How pay be equalized across countries? This is the important thing. Many firms have recently moved toward a compensation structure that is based on global standards, because there are because of the market difference. In one market, like we had in the last slide, that in US they are compensated with the high figures, while on the other hand in Japan half of the amount is paid to the expatriate manager compared to the US, and a quarter of the amount is paid to the Hong Kong expatriates. And because of this difference, and companies considering they are operating across the globe, there should be some standardization for compensation. Many firms have recently moved towards a compensation structure which is based on the standardization across the markets. Especially important in firms with the geocentric staffing policy. People who are hiring firms who are hiring the people across the globe, they are especially focusing on global standards of compensation. But most firms still set pay according to the prevailing standard in each company. But important thing like this saying that still most of the firms are following the home country, their country's standards. If there are some trends of high compensation, they are going to pay a higher amount. If in those markets, especially in the developing countries, if the compensation rate is low, they are going to pay low to the expatriate managers. How should expatriates be paid? Most firms use the balance sheet approach. This is one approach to for compensation. Equalizes purchasing power across countries, so employees have the same living standard in their foreign posting as at home. Under the balance sheet approach, it equalizes purchasing power across countries, so employees have the same living standard in their foreign posting as at home, and adds a financial incentive to take the position. And note that home country outlays for the employees are designated as income taxes, house expenditures for goods and services, and reserves. This is the overall compensation packages include these things. And the balance sheet approach attempts to provide the expatriate with the same standard living in those countries as they enjoy at home, plus the financial inducements for accepting our. For instance, a US guy serving in the USA is sent for in China, though the level of compensation is really low in China as compared to in US, but because of this balance sheet approach, that guy will be paid the same amount. That guy will be paid such amount in which that guy will maintain the standard of living in the cost what he is paying to maintain his living in the USA. The same cost will be he will be compensated in the same amount. He could with the amount he could maintain the same standard of living of US in China as well. And balance sheet approach, if we talk more in detail about that thing, is the most widely used approach by organizations, and its main idea is to maintain the expatriate's standard of living throughout the assignment at the same level as it was in his or her home country. In other words, it is about ensuring the same purchasing power, which helps to maintain the home country's lifestyle. Another important notion is that the balance sheet approach implies matching the expatriate's salary with the home country's peers, not with the host country colleagues. There are two common methods of calculating the balance sheet approach. The home-based method, a term often used interchangeably with balance sheet, bases the expert's salary pay on the salary for the comparable job in his home country. On the other hand, the headquarter-based method starts with the salary of the comparable job in the corporate headquarters city. For example, an expat from the Dallas office of the New York City-based company would receive a salary structured from New York-based rates. The same goes for an expat from London or Tokyo office for the same company. There are two types of balance sheet calculation approaches. The first one is the home-based method, and the second one is the headquarter-based method. Under the home-based method is after pay the salary for the comparable job. Whatever the people are getting in his home country of the equal job, he is going to pay the same amount. And the headquarter-based, what the headquarter people are getting of the equal rank people, what are the what sort of amount that managers are getting in the headquarter. In general, a pure home-based balance sheet calculation of the expatriate pay works in this way. Starts with home-based gross income including bonuses, deduct home tax, social security and pension contribution, add or subtract a cost of living allowance. Usually companies do not subtract, instead they allow the expatriate to benefit from the negative differential. Add a housing allowance, they don't cut the amount if there is a difference, rather than they leave that amount with the expatriate manager. Add a housing allowance either with or without housing norm deduction. Add incentive premium including general mobility premium and the sometimes hardship premium. And the last thing is add or subtract the equalized taxes, in other words gross the net salary to protect against the double tax obligation in the home, in order to protect against the double taxation in the home and host country, that person will be taxed across only in the net salary. How should expatriates should be paid? A compensation package has 5 components. The base salary, normally in the same range as the base salary for the similar position in the home country, can be paid either in the home currency or in the foreign currency. Foreign service premium, extra pay the expatriate receive for working outside the country of the origin. Various allowances, hardship allowances, housing, cost of living, education, these are the different allowances they are going to get. And the tax differential may have to pay income tax to both the home country and the host country government. No reciprocal tax treaty exists. If there is no agreement or tax agreement exists between the countries, might be that guy, that expatriate, that manager is going to pay double tax. Benefits. What are the benefits? Many firms provide the same level of medical and pension benefits abroad that employees receive at home. It's obvious. In order to entice those expatriates for the foreign positions, their firms provide the same level of medical and the pension benefits abroad that employees receive at home. Okay, here is the global compensation package at the McDonald's. McDonald's with 400,000 managers and senior staff employees in 118 countries around the world. By the early 2000s, McDonald's realized it had to develop a consistent global compensation and performance appraisal strategy. After months of consultation with managers all over the world, in 2004, the company began to roll out its new global compensation program. This is a brief intro of the McDonald's firm. They have the 400,000 managers, shift managers, and the branch managers across the globe. In 2000, because the McDonald's is operating all over the globe, they wanted to have a consistent global compensation and appraisal strategy. In order to create that strategy in 2000, they started to talk with the manager across the globe, and then within 4 years they had developed a strategy and they started to implement their strategy across the across the globe. One important element of this program calls for the corporate head office to provide local country managers with a menu of business principles to focus on in the coming year. These principles include areas such as customer service, marketing, restaurant re-imaging. Each country manager then picks three to five areas to focus on for success in the local market. If, for example, if France is introducing a new menu item, it might create business targets around that for the year. Human resource managers then submit their business cases and targets to senior executives at headquarters for approval. At the end of the year, the country's annual incentive pool is based on how the region met its target as well as on the business unit's operating income. A portion of an individual employee's annual bonus is based upon that mix. Now we are talking about that McDonald's have introduced a local manager with a menu of business principle. Mean what sort of in the coming year, before the start of the year, the company asks from the managers that what should be your focus. Either they can focus on the service, customer services, marketing, or restaurant re-imaging. These are the three different dimensions among which the manager can choose, and in the end of the year, that manager should be evaluated on the basis of that choice, and the portion of an individual employee's annual bonus is based on that mix. Despite that focus, and then beside that focused or selective domain, the manager will be evaluated on the basis of its overall performance, overall net target in that return on investment and performance in that region. And I mean to say that overall performance output of the region, performance, sales, and this sort of thing, and plus his preferred domain. On the basis of those two things, performance of that person is evaluated. The other portion of employees' annual incentives is based on individual performance. McDonald's has always had a performance rating system, but in 2004 the company introduced global goal guidelines that suggest 20% of employees receive its highest rating, 70% the middle, and 10% the bottom. By giving guidelines rather than forced ranking, McDonald's hopes to encourage differentiation of performance while allowing for more local flexibility nuances. By providing principles and guidelines and yet allowing local managers to customize their compensation program to meet local market demand, McDonald's also claims it has seen a reduction in turnover. The company's own internal surveys suggest more employees now believe that their compensation is fair and reflects local market condition. It's saying this after when they introduced in 2004 the compensation introductory guidelines, they also provide the global guidelines and guidelines to all the managers operating across the world. They are saying this thing in that the first this compensation and this evaluation, on the basis of that evaluation undertaken in 2004, 20% of the employees receive the high rating, 70% receive the average, and the 10% really receive the bottom rating. By providing their flexibility that the manager can choose the domain of its own choice, they believe that their compensation, the manager believe that their compensation is fair and reflects local market conditions. Okay. Now there is another element which is called international labor relations. Why the international labor relations are important? The question is, can organized labor limit the choices available to an international business? Can organized labor limit the choices available to an international business? Labor unions can limit a firm's ability to pursue a transnational or global strategy. How a labor union can limit a firm's ability to pursue a national. For instance, a firm is intending to move its production unit from USA to China. The labor union can create the hurdle. HRM needs to foster harmony and minimize conflict between the management and organized labor. Now, when management wants to cut down the number of staff, or in the compensation strategy or its evaluation strategy, this HRM works as the bridge between the management and the organized labor. Organized labor mean the labor unions. What are the concerns of the organized labor? Now we talk about what are the main concerns that the labor unions have or organized labor have. Multinationals can counter union bargaining power. Multinationals can counter union bargaining power by threatening to move production to another country. This is the first concern of the organized labor, that multinational companies are threatening or might be they will move their production to another country. Another country mean they can move to the countries where the labor is really cheap or resources are really cheap. Multinational will farm out only low-skilled jobs to foreign plants, making it easier to switch production location. Okay, the one option is they are going to move the entire production facility to another country, and the second one is they are going to open a production facility into another country with the low-skilled jobs, only the workers, and in the future, if the country wants to switch the production location, they can do it very easily. But in the initial level, they can have both plants, main production plant in one country, in for instance USA, and in China they have only the low scale jobs, plant where only the low skilled laborers are employed. Multinational will import employment practice and contractual agreements from their home countries and reduce the influence of union. Okay, if the union is really demanding and influencing what they can do, companies can bring, for instance, US companies going in China, and in China they face this thing that there are labor unions and they are demanding some really unrealistic things. What they can do, they can, rather than hiring the Chinese employees, they can bring from their home country, they can hire the US employees in China. Of course it will be costly for them, but at least this step will break the power of influence of the power of the unions. How does organized labor respond to multinational power? These are the three things we have seen, that how multinational companies can react to the organized labor. Now we talk about how organized labor react to these threats from the multinational companies. Organized labor has responded to the increased bargaining power of multinational corporations by trying to set up their own international organizations. In the first step, what they are trying to do, rather than if a US company is threatening their organized labor that if they are demanding so much, they are going to move to Thailand. But what they can do, these organized labor can get in touch with the Thai labor unions, and they can match their demands in both markets. So the threat of moving away from their production from one market to another will be reduced. lobbying for national legislation to restrict multinational. The second thing is they can pursue the legislators, the politicians, to pass those bills or regulations which can restrict firms to moving away their production facilities from one market to another. The third one, trying to achieve regulation of multinationals through international organizations such as United Nations. Okay, the first thing is they are trying to install some regulatory barriers for moving away the production facilities, and through the local legislators, through local politicians. The second thing is they can contact, they can get in touch with the international organization like UN to initiate some, to take some initiative to stop firms from moving away their production facilities. So far these efforts have had only limited success. And now the reality is, despite the labor organized unions, the organized laborers are responding to the threats, but there is only limited success of their efforts. Because like we are seeing this thing that firms are moving away from the developed countries to developing countries, and despite their effort of the organized labor, firms are moving away. Firms are more and more firms from multinational companies from the developed countries are moving to developing countries or emerging economies, and nobody can stop them. How are multinational companies responding to organized labor? Many firms are centralizing labor relations to enhance the bargaining power of the multinational, vice versa organized labor. Many firms are centralizing labor relations to enhance. Okay, across the market, companies are trying to have a bargaining, in more and more interacting and getting the views of the organized labor to get the bargaining power of them, to get the bargaining power from labor union to the multinational companies. In the past, labor relations were usually decentralized to individual subsidiaries. Okay, labor was organized according to the subsidiaries, not on the basis of the parent firm. This feature decentralized the organized labor. The way in which work is organized within the plant can be a major source of competitive advantage. So it is important for management to have good relationship with them. When work is organized within the plant, okay, if the relationship between the managers, between the management and the organized labor or labor is really good, overall productivity will be higher. In a way, that good relationship can be a competitive advantage for that firm. When we say that is a competitive advantage, might be in other firm, might be to sustain in the market, firms need to have a good relationship, because this good relationship will ultimately affect on employee productivity, which eventually affects on productivity of the overall firm, the performance of overall firm, and this can be a competitive advantage for them. It's important for management to have a good relationship with labor. Okay, now we talk, that's the stuff that we have done. That's all for global human resource management chapter, and we are going to do the summary of this lecture now. We had started from the concept of global mindset. In the global mindset we had discussed the two elements. The first one is the cognitive complexity, and the second one was the cosmopolitan outlook. These are the two main important of the global mindset. A global mindset and then we discuss about the 4 ways from where this global mindset can be attained. Global mindset, the first one is if the manager is grown up in such culture, in such environment where family has the biculture. Biculture means there are several, might be parents are from the different culture, might be parents and grandparents are from the different cultures, might be home and the neighborhood have the different cultures, might be the second way is might be the guy, the person, the expatriate, the manager have lived in several countries in the childhood or in the during the education period. Then that's mean they have the manager, the person have the orientation with the different cultures. Learning foreign languages, or the third part is when if the person knows the different languages, then that means that's that person knows the different cultures, and if the person knows the different cultures, that means that got the global mindset of that manager is the person is global. Training focus. Now then the next aspect that we had discussed, the first one is the global mindset. What are the constituents of global mindset? Then what are the factors which contribute towards the global mindset? And then we have discussed about the importance of the training. Training focuses upon the preparing the manager for the specific job before going for the performing the task. The training is provided to those managers. Management development is concerned with the developing the skills of the manager over time, give the manager a skill set and reinforces organizational culture. This training, the management development is more concerned with providing the training, to providing the skills to enhance the manager's skill set and to strengthen the organizational culture. In training, we had seen the three types of training: the cultural training, the language training, and the practical training. The cultural training means the manager, that person is providing the training of the culture of the new market, and especially if the culture is really different or entirely different from the home market or home country's culture, then the intensive cultural training is required. But on the other hand, if the culture is not so significantly different, for instance, if the firm is operating in the USA and that firm wants to send its managers to the Canada, cultural difference is not so big, so might be the cultural training is not so intensive. Cultural training is not required. The next one is language training. Language training means, again, if that guy is moving to the country where same language is speaking, like if the guy American guy is sending to the UK or some English speaking country, then of course there's no need for the language training. But or on the countries where they can speak English, like in India they can speak good English, and that's why there might be the American people, the English native people, they don't need to have some language training. But if that person is, that manager is going to serve in the market where there is no orientation of the English language, like in Chinese and the Russian and the French markets, then the language training of the language is really inevitable, and because in order to contact with the employees or the employees or the local employees, it's necessary for the managers to learn at least the basics of that language. Practical knowledge is more important for not only for the manager but also for the manager's family. It helps the expatriate and his family to ease themselves to adjust in the daily routine life, in order to adjust in the new market, in the new place, in the new environment. The practical training is provided. But studies show that only 30% of the managers sent for 1 year to 5 year expatriate assignment receive training before their departure. Management development program increase the overall skill level of the managers through ongoing management education, rotation of managers through jobs within the firm to give them varied experiences. Evaluating expatriates can be especially one. Now we did discuss about the after that we discuss about the evaluation. of expatriates, because they are working in the different market, and there might be the manager sitting in the home market, and typically both host nation manager and the home office manager evaluate the performance of the expatriate manager. I mean, in evaluating the expatriate manager, both the feedback, I mean, evaluation from the host and home market manager is important. Both types of managers are subject to unintentional bias. Home country managers tends to rely on hard data when evaluating expatriates. Host country manager can be biased towards their own framework. I mean, the biasness can be arrived from both sides, from the home market manager and the host market manager, from the different perspective. To reduce this bias in performance appraisal, more weight should be given to an on-site manager's appraisal than to an off-site manager's appraisal. This is the first way to reduce the bias. A former expatriate who has served in the same location should be involved in the process. This is the second way to bring in the expatriate, the manager who already served in that market. Now there are two more important issues in compensation: how to adjust compensation to reflect differences in economic circumstances and compensation practices, and the second one is how to expatriate managers, how to pay them. Now the compensation package has five components. The first one is a basic salary, normally in the same range as the base salary for the similar position in the home country, can be paid either in the home currency or in the host country. The next one is the foreign service premium. They are going to pay a little bit higher compared to the home country, people who are serving in the home country, because extra pay the expatriate services for working outside of his country of origin. Various allowances. Now they can get some other allowances as well. That can be the hardship allowance, the housing allowance, cost of living allowance, and education allowances. The fourth element that's really important for the compensation packages is tax differentials. Might be because if the countries they don't have the treaty tax, some adjustment, something, then there is a possibility that that person will be subject to double taxation. And tax differential may have to pay income tax to both home country and the host country. Government no reciprocal tax. Company usually cover extra tax assessment in order to cover the tax differentials. Company have these arrangements. And the benefits are many funds provide the same level of medical. Okay. The fifth part of the compensation is the other benefits. Other benefits include the medical and pension benefits, and they try to they try to harmonize these benefits across the home and host country. What they are receiving in the home country, they are going to get in same amount, same benefits in the host country. These were the five main benefits, five main components of the compensation, and we have discussed about the compensation should be harmonized across this is the important thing, it should be host and home country. Thank you for today. Allah Hafiz.